Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another fantastic episode on the Unleashing Potentials podcast. I'm your host, Bernadette, and joining me today is special guest Dominic. How are you?
I'm really good, Bernadette. Thank you for asking.
Yes, you're welcome. So, Dominic, where about are you tuning in from?
I'm tuning from Miami.
Oh,
So,
awesome.
southern part of California. We've seen a large influx of people coming in recently. So if you're from if you lived in New York or California, you're likely now living in Florida.
Oh, wow. And it's the weather's nice year round, or it gets a little bit cool?
It's very hot and unbearable, kind of like the winter months. So everyone's winter, our summer, think of it kind of like an extreme summer.
Yeah.
And everyone's winter here, think of it like a really, really good summer.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Welcome to the podcast, Dominic. I see that you're a relationship expert. This interview is a divine intervention for me
Oh,
and for
good. I'm
many
glad I'm
other
here.
people as well. I am so excited to talk to you and to hear more of what you do. Can you tell us what you do, and then we'll kind of carry the interview from there?
Yeah. So relationship coach. And I feel it's like a divine intervention, as you said, for a lot of people.
Mhm.
I mean, I think we've heard the phrase it's all relational, and it turns out that that's the case. There was a period of time, maybe it still happens, people would go sit in a cave, meditate, they would reach high states of consciousness.
Mhm.
And, maybe they would come out at some point and share with us and, they would help us with our consciousness. And I think that's brilliant. I would like to see those same people maintain those high states of consciousness and do that in the city and do that in a relationship.
That would
Yeah.
be nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what happens, um, just the general person, it's easier to be unagitated or undisturbed when you're by yourself. And as soon as like there's a mix of one person, and that could be any person, it could be a grocery store, it could be someone in the parking lot, it could be someone you're talking to on the customer service line. That's when the difficulty starts to come in. And what happens is just, people get triggered,
Yeah.
meaning they feel like emotions they don't want to have, and they have to sort through them. And what happens when it's like an intimate relationship? So I'm a relationship coach, but really for all relationships. So I work a lot with people, with like coworkers, bosses, on the job stuff, and as well as like siblings, parents. And I especially shine in intimate relationships. Um, and so in an intimate relationship, you can't hide. The person's going to see you as you are at some point. And they're going to either like it or not like it. And they're probably going to share with you what they like and don't like. And a lot of times in relationships, you have someone looking at you, telling you they love you and how they'd love you more if you would change. And of course, you're probably thinking, you general, well,
Mhm.
I'd rather just be loved the way I am without changing. So
Yeah.
I help people navigate that whole space.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for clarifying that you do all types of relationships because this is going to be a very impactful episode and I'm excited about it. But let's get to know you a little bit more, Dominic. Did you always wanted to do what you're doing right now as a job? And what was your upbringing like? And how are you liking the job that you do now?
Yeah. If you would ask me uh at any point in my life in terms of career aspirations, I've never would have come up with relationship coach.
Mm,
It just wouldn't have been there. Um, so I'll tell you a little bit how that I popped up. But let's see, grew up on the south side of Chicago. So maybe people can relate to it if they're not from there. President Obama spent some time there. His wife grew up on the south side of Chicago, so similar environment, and had two older siblings. Mom was very present, and dad was very present. So both in the house, and um, I would say between the two. Mom was very loving and supportive, and I think dad was very much the same way. And he had uh let's say definitely much more strictness than my mom did. But I think between the two of them, they did a good job with the three of us. Yeah, so in terms of career aspiration, I think when I was younger, I said, "Oh, I want to be an engineer," and I did that. I went to Stanford, got an engineering degree, and I worked for a while. And then at some point, I said, "Well, I'd like an MBA." So I went to Wharton, got an MBA. I did management consulting. I worked in some technology companies, and then I did a fairly long stint with the U.S. government, with Homeland Security. So at no point along the way did I think I'd be a relationship coach. Um, but I think maybe to shorten that one, and we can dive deeper into it and pick it apart.
Yeah.
I found out when I started managing people, leading people, how important relationships were, and I guess kind of how hard it was to navigate them. Because even my own personal relationships were, I'd say, fine uh, up to then. And what I realized, mm, the better I was, the better my team was.
Mm.
And so that really came to like a lot of like self-work, looking at myself, increase my own self-awareness. I'd say emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And then once I started seeing some good outcomes from there, the
Mhm.
other thing that happened, it's kind of around the same time. A friend of mine really encouraged me to go into coaching, and I completely ignored her.
Mm.
And then she cornered me one day and kind of like grabbed me, what do they call it, lapels or shirt collars or something. And she said, "Hey, I don't think you're listening to me." So when I said I think you should go into coaching, it wasn't just a casual comment. I've actually paid for this. I've done quite a bit of self-development work for myself. I've been in many different coaching containers, and like our casual conversations have been way more helpful than a lot of the ones like I paid for.
Mhm.
So at that point, I looked into it,
Mhm.
as is my way. I got certified as that, and I started getting clients. So what happened, my big discovery was many of the clients I was speaking to were women, and a lot of what they wanted to speak about were relationships. And I'd say secondarily from there, but it's related, things like confidence, self-esteem,
Mhm.
feeling stuck, or feelings of frustration.
Mhm.
So it was just been a landscape that I've been really good at helping them navigate.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, relationship is so complex. It's so messy. It depends on the which lens or perspective you're looking at it. I think relationship, how could I put this? I think it starts very young, from our relationship with our parents. Have you talked about the different types of attachment styles?
Um, I haven't here. It comes up a lot of times in the conversation I have with clients. Um, yeah, it does start really young. It's there's this phrase, I think it's from a Greek philosopher. It says, show me the boy at 7, and I'll show you the man.
Yeah.
And there's other people who said similar same things. Modern findings have found a similar thing. Basically, ages from like 0 to 7. I think some people say 0 to 10. That's really where your operating system is loaded in.
Mhm.
So, operating system is, something I think we're familiar with, say, from like our computers or like our smartphones.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we noticed after some time has passed, the operating system gets upgraded
Yeah.
and we get more functionality, and the phones get easier to use and they actually become better. Um, we're not upgrading our own operating systems. And that's where the problem comes into place, because when you're young, the operating system you load, it's largely very functional to the circumstance that you're dealing with in the moment. So, and one of the, I think, prime purposes of the operating system is to keep you safe. And so the behaviors that you're learning from the operating system you're learning, it's unique to your environment. And so you're picking up behaviors that in the background says, okay, if I do this, I'll be safe. If I do this, I'll be secure. And the problem is when you become an adult and you become a partner to someone, what happens is that doesn't work anymore.
Mm.
So let's say, here's a big example. I think it would relate to a lot of people, the whole people pleasing thing.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so when you're younger, if you're feeling, say, pressure, coercion, like to do something, and maybe you get punished in some way, or like something's withheld from you, you'll get the message, operating system, oh, I should just do what's being asked of me. If
Mhm.
I do what's being asked of me, like people seem to be happier with me. People are more accepting. They don't withhold love or affection. So I'll just do what people ask me.
Mhm.
Very functional. It stops the pain, of childhood, or at least that particular pain. And
Mhm.
then you just kind of do that with everything. So whenever you encounter some, say, authority figure or someone you want to like you, and you already have in the mindset that you want someone to like you,
Mhm.
um, you'll do things for people like all the time. People know you. Oh, you're so helpful. Like, oh, you never say no. Like, you're
Mhm.
always there. Like you're just like the best.
Mhm.
And part of you is feeling really good about that, and part of you is feeling kind of weak and depleted and frustrated because yes, you're always doing something for other people, and you're doing things even when you don't feel like it, and you're feeling frustrated. And perhaps in the background, people are also saying like, yeah, that person's great, but she's kind of a doormat. She never like sticks up for herself.
Mhm.
And then you imagine you take that into a relationship,
Yeah.
and the partner, he's bringing, his own set of things, his upgraded operating system, and then the two energies just kind of bounce off of each other, um, making not the best situation, making it worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, childhood is very much a part of it. It kind of childhood, whatever experience there, just kind of echoes through the rest of life, unless you do some type of intervention.
Yeah, 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 I agree. Because I find for me from my childhood, I find that I had to parent myself. Now I have
Hmm.
kids. How do I parent my kids while I'm still parenting myself? Right? It's a very complex relationship with myself, and I'm sure other people can relate to this if they've had either similar childhood, right? And also I think I repeated that again, but what our parents modeled is what we carry into adulthood.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
entirely. I
Yeah.
mean, the modeling is everything. And if you want to do and I'm so thinking anyone that hears this, if you want to do like the best you can for like your children, it's just do the best you can for yourself. And
Mm,
so, children, I love this phrase, like, children they may fail to understand. No, I'm sorry. They may fail to listen to you, but
mm,
they'll never fail to imitate you.
mhm,
So, if you're doing things that are helpful to yourself, I call them these activities like self-honoring yourself. I
mhm,
think the children will pick up on that. And so there's a whole range of it. I mean, it doesn't really end, but self-honoring yourself can just be, getting a good night's sleep if you can. Maybe a little bit challenging with children. Um, it's drinking, hydrating, yourself. It's making like, really good food choices. It's uh holding yourself accountable. And
mhm,
so instead of like blaming or criticizing or judging people around you, or like, talking gossip, like, in front of the children and stuff, um, your children can see you being frustrated. They can see you like sitting with the emotion a little bit, and they can also see you making an intentional choice.
mhm.
And so that's teaching them, emotional regulation. That's teaching them emotional intelligence. That's teaching them like the value of just not doing the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So the more you can self-honor yourself, and the more you can, um, in a broad sense, I would say heal. Um, the the better things are going to work out for the children. And I would say, in many ways, it's not going to matter per se.
Mm,
Let me say this more precisely. there will always be imperfect outcomes in childhood, and in life in general. So the thing is, we're not trying to raise the children in a perfect environment or raise them perfectly. We're trying to raise an environment so they're learning skill sets that they can use going forward in life. And
Mhm.
so going back to the people pleasing one, well, that's not a skill set that's going to have long-term viability, but a skill set where a person, learns to say no or learns to check in with themselves and say, I don't feel like doing that, but I am willing to do something else. So, how do you feel about this? Respond, maybe negotiate a little bit. And as they say, no, no is a complete sentence. So you can say no without explanation or feeling bad about it. And you can say no with kindness and compassion, but it's still a no. And you can feel okay knowing that someone else is like disappointed and knowing that someone else wants something and knowing that you'll get over it and they'll get over it too.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing. Let's tie this into family relationships, because all of us have families. Some of us are the black sheep of the family, but I know as soon as boundaries are set, there's backlash of some kind. And at times we just put up with the dysfunction because it's the normal, because we don't want to be left out or rejected by our own blood and family. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I always think like, like how how deep in the game do you want to go or how much do you want to heal? And so when I say game, I think it's actually healthy to approach life as a game, meaning you're in it,
Hmm.
you're participating in it, and there's no one that's going to be able to exit life. Like you can't just leave it. So you're going to keep participating on a daily basis. So might as well figure out how to have fun with that, and might as well figure out how to get what you want. And so the interesting thing about family, so when I work with my clients, I give them a heads up. I say, if you want to deal with your family stuff,
Hmm.
um, we're going to work on other things first.
Mm.
So what people want to do a lot of time is just they want to work in a relationship with their mom like right away, or work in a relationship with their dad right away. And I'd say, well, no, it's kind of like, let's say, I tell them, if let's say you like boxing,
Mhm.
you don't step into the ring in your first fight, you take on the heavyweight champion of the world. Like you're not conditioned, you're not ready. And that's what those mom and dad relationships and even sibling relationships are like equivalently. So I'd say we're gonna train, we're gonna condition, we're gonna like get your endurance up, and then we're gonna do some sparring, and then you're gonna like work your way up to that.
Mhm.
And that's just an analogy. It's not to say that it's all fighting. And so rather than say work on that relationship first, I would have people work on a relationship they have with themselves.
Mm.
And it's really getting to like know themselves. Like self-knowledge is invaluable. We've all heard the phrase "know thyself," and you would say, "Well, what's the point of that?" But the more we know ourselves, we know what we really like about ourselves, and we also know what we don't like about ourselves as much.
Mhm.
But the more we dig into understand what we don't like about ourselves, we get to understand like why we don't like about it or why we made it wrong, or maybe we didn't make it wrong, maybe someone else made it wrong,
Mhm.
and so. Maybe a person says, well, I don't like I can be loud sometimes. And I would say, well, who said you shouldn't be loud? Or what's wrong with being loud? Like, don't you trust yourself to know when to be loud and not?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, um, so that self-knowledge really leads to something else, which is self-appreciation
Mm.
and our self-acceptance. And when you think like radical, you can think radical self-improvement, radical change. So I'm talking like really radical self-acceptance and being,
Yeah.
no matter what it is, you just accept it
Mm.
and embrace it. And so that's what I call about the conditioning and building up the endurance. And so that's the place to start. And let's say, okay, we start to step into like family members. the thing is, families are special because not only are these relationships unique, but like frequently the least conscious behavior happens within families.
Mm,
And like the environment like that is most without borders,
mhm.
boundaries is within families.
Yeah.
And I would say that's very common. I'm not talking about like the exception. I'd say it's more the rule. And so um people become the black sheep in the family when they start to have those boundaries.
Mm,
And the family system
mhm.
reacts to that because those boundaries are new, but they're also kind of reflecting back to the family something that's painful.
Yeah.
Um, and so a lot of times there's more hammering down on it. So, this is handled in different ways. I would say for the person that truly wants to like improve things, sometimes things can get worse before they get better.
Mm,
So, I mean, if you think uh about it, there's some people you just realize you're not going to have a good relationship with. And I would say with family members, you can come to that realization and you can say, well, maybe now's not the time. Or
mm,
like or maybe I'm not in a good enough place myself to take all this on. Maybe I need to just like some time apart and I'll work on like healing myself. And so I know some people may be hearing this and they'll say, well, my circumstances are such, like I can't do that. I always say, never be too certain what you think you're certain about.
mm.
And when it really matters to you, you can do anything you want. Because at the end of the day, sometimes if you have certain relationships with family members that are so poor, I mean, we've actually seen like, family members kill one another, or like there's like physical abuse with one another. But it can also be a health thing in terms of you might come in some chronic conditions over time. It's because, whatever you don't deal with, eventually your body is going to make you deal with. And it'll make it you deal with it by giving you some type of chronic something, a chronic pain, a chronic digestion or intestinal problem,
Yeah.
like migraines type of thing. Um, and it'll keep getting louder and louder and louder until you have to make that the first and foremost thing that you're working on because it's a matter of like life and death at that point.
Yeah.
And so, I impress upon people, there's no reason for it to get to that point, but there's certain things are only going to work certain way. And so you can't get a family member to treat you in the way that you want to be until you've actually done that for yourself. You're the first person who has to treat yourself in the manner that you want with respect, with attention, with care, with setting your own boundaries and your own standards and adhering to those. When you've done that for yourself, then you can attempt to do that more with a family member because you're not looking for that family member, say, to love or care for you in a certain way because you're already doing that for yourself. That's where the strength comes from to interact with family members in a better way.
Yeah. Oh, mine. It's like you're speaking to my situation. I'm just listening and soaking in all the wisdom and everything you have to share. Uh, my family relationship is so messy. It is so complex. There's so much pain, so much rage and trauma. I saw someone and she's like, it's like a knotted mess, and that's all I was left with. Like, I didn't start it. So how do I make the best of it in a way that will impact everyone that's involved, like a chain reaction? But it is so complex. Sibling rivalries. Me and my sister, she blamed me for abuse that happened to her, but we're like enemies. Like we go 5 years talking, 2 years talking, 1 year not talking. It's just constant. We can't find common ground to move past the pain and trauma that we went through. It's just
Hmm.
complex. So thank you for everything you shared. I love
Yeah,
it all. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is so
yeah.
healing. Thank you.
Well, to add to that, I would say, it's not say your fault or your sister's fault. I mean, I'd say very likely it didn't begin with you. That's
Mm.
actually a name of a book. It did not begin with you. And and what it talks about is, generational trauma and how things get passed on from generation to generation. So,
Mhm,
I think a lot of people are familiar with the model. Well, if the grandparent was an alcoholic,
mhm,
then like the children might be alcoholic, um, or substance abuse or what have you. But I would say, like many things get passed down. And so like low conscious behavior gets passed down. So like, boundaries are like a real thing. I mean, it's the only way the world really functions. So like boundaries, they say good fences make good neighbors. And
mhm,
so, in an ideal situation, which no one has, um, the parent, I'll really take a step back. This is like the model. And so like the children are not really the property of the parents. Like it's
mhm,
souls are coming into the world. They're incarnating and they're coming into their bodies and they're learning how to function here. And so a parent is really welcoming a new soul here.
mhm,
And so it's not about you do what I tell you. It's let me teach you how to be the best possible person you can in this world to the best of my ability.
mhm.
And so it's really a place of service and sacrifice.
Yeah.
Let me do what I can for you so you can grow up with the least amount of impediments possible or like growing into like your gifts as much as possible. Well, a lot of time that gets interrupted because the parent has unresolved things. And so those unresolved things may be a parent who's very much saying like, well, I own you, you do what I tell you. Um,
Yep.
and if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to hit you, or I'm going to withhold something from you. I'm going to withhold affection. I'm going to ostracize you, or I'm going to ridicule you. Some type of badgering way to bring the child back into line. And so, and I want to emphasize that this is not a blame thing. It's just kind of just the way things happen. And so that parent didn't learn any better him or herself.
Mhm.
And so they're just kind of doing the same thing that they were taught when they came into the world. And they're just modeling, other unconscious behavior that they've seen happen like along the way. And they're just passing that along to their children. So, and again, it's very important, like, because we're really focused on effectiveness, and blame and judgment doesn't produce that for us. And so we're focused on what happened, not saying this person did this and this is why I'm like this. And so I would say very likely there's some dynamic going on with you and your sister where, you know, competition was encouraged. There was some like scarcity of some resource.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way you guys got through it was you took it out on each other, because if you took it out on your parents, that probably would have been the worst option. The worst punishment or the worst consequences could have happened.
Mhm.
Um, I'll tell you, like in my own circumstances, I've had a brother growing up, like we really got into it, and like I'm the youngest, and so I felt things were very imbalanced for like quite some time. Um, but I'm actually like very grateful for him, because
Yeah.
with my dad, I couldn't get angry and do anything about it. Like sometimes, and this wasn't really what's going on, but sometimes there's a phrase like, don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about. So my dad was somewhat in the vicinity of that, like at times.
Mhm.
And so I was just like, okay, well, I just got to figure out what you want and give it to you. But with the brother I'm speaking about, I could just unleash myself, which was which was really good, because it taught me, how to stand up for myself. It
Mhm.
taught me how to have boundaries. And it also taught me that, you know what, this energy is actually, it's not unique in the world. It's not just in my family. Like
Mhm.
tons of people have this thing going on about not having boundaries and wanting to feel better somehow by imposing themselves on me. And so it was a good training ground. And so I actually bring just a lot of these learnings like to my clients. So, with your sister, um, I think one of the things to accept is that you guys probably had circumstances that were overwhelming for you when you were younger, and now as adults you get to choose what you want, and also understand like not associating with each other at all is a choice. And if you do want to, have some type of closer association, I think this is where you bring in a third party and you say, let's work with a therapist, or let's work with a counselor, or let's work with a coach, because, we want to have a better like relationship. Um, and just see where things go. Because there, the most important thing about a third party, say myself, is like, we're not involved in the drama. We, we're objective. And
Yeah.
so we're also going to help you see different perspectives, and we're also going to help in the healing. So even
Mhm.
though a lot of times I'm working with, couples in that intimate relationship, a lot of the same thing applies, let's say if I'm going to work in a sibling relationship, which is, yeah, you guys need to have boundaries with each other. And like when you cross the line, like you need to stop. And it doesn't have to be a violent thing.
Mhm.
I think the problem and the misinterpretation a lot of times people have with boundaries, um, is they feel like when you establish a boundary, like you're doing some violence against them.
Mhm.
And you're not. You're just saying, no, this is too much for me. Like I don't want to participate in this, or I'm not willing to proceed. It's really what the communication is.
Mhm.
And um sometimes when people really can't respect that, then that's when you have to separate for some amount of time and just say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. That was not my intent. I hope we can, get through this. I just don't think now is like productive for us.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of like a wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. Because the other thing is you don't want to feed the energy. And so, um, a lot of times if one person smiles at another,
Yeah.
you'll get a smile back.
Mhm.
But if you're like glowering or scowling at someone else, that kind of puts them on the defensive, or kind of makes them like want to react in a similar like energy. And so I, I'd say when you feel someone going low, or you feel yourself going low, just
Mhm.
pull out. There's a phrase like, once you determine that you're in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah, yeah. And I find that the third party, the fourth and fifth party has been extended family members, which it's a cycle. They started it. So for me to go back to them, say, hey, what do you think? My mom, she really doesn't help. So it's just worse and worse and worse. You talked a little bit about incarnation. Tell me more about it in aspect to the work that you're doing right now.
Well, so I'll preface it and let people remind them I do have an engineering background,
Mm.
and along the way I'm fine with all the woo stuff out there. And by woo, if people want to talk about
Mhm.
crystals, or they're aliens, or they're from some star system, like I'm willing to hear all of it. Mainly because like when I'm hearing people talk, I never think someone's telling me the truth. Like I don't think they're lying. I just think they're just sharing their perspective from me to with me.
Mhm.
And I feel about the same when I'm saying.
Mhm.
Like I even tell my clients, I'd love to tell you the truth if I knew what that was. I
Mhm.
said that the only thing I'm telling you is a perspective. I think it's a good perspective. I can tell you why I think it's a good perspective. Many times I think it might be a better perspective than one you have. And it's perspective, belief, same thing. Um, but truth itself, like it exists. I mean, there is objective truth out there, but it's very elusive. Like you just mentioned your family. Like, did you have a good childhood? You know, you have a perspective on that. Like your mom has a perspective on that,
Mhm.
and the extended family has like, perspective on that. All probably like very different from each other.
Mhm.
Um, so when I say like incarnation, what I'm alluding to is the fact that there's a spiritual side to existence, or what we're existing in, these bodies are really, I like to call them like space suits.
Mhm.
And so, this is our capability to roam the earth and explore and experience it. And so very sophisticated spacesuits, we get like nice vision with it. We get like a good muscular and skeletal system. We have like little sensory things, we can touch things, we can taste with it. We can replenish our spacesuit by just grabbing things and putting it inside of us and stuff. But the real secret sauce is it's not the spacesuit, it's the being inside the spacesuit. It's the being inside the body. It's the body's just a shell.
Yeah.
And so when we incarnate basically our non-physical side, I mean, I can say like energetic side, um, that's coming into physical form.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so for the rest of our lives, we're living in this physical existence, um, with a lot of constraints. Um, but with these constraints, we actually get a lot of like new learnings. It's interesting. If you have like $1 billion, you don't really have to be too creative about how you're going to make ends meet by the end of the month.
Mhm.
But if you don't have any money in your bank account and rent and utilities are due at the end of the month, you're going to be very creative about how you're going to like make ends meet by the end of the month. And I think that's part of the existence, because outside of this physical incarnation, we're non-corporeal, we're energetic, and we're much more, I'd say, connected to say divine wisdom, divine intelligence. You can say to God or source, whatever works. But it's more that all knowing, more like having like more awareness. And so, we come here and if we get all these capabilities and all this wisdom and all this knowledge that we have, and there's purpose to that because that gives us constraints
Mhm.
that force us to grow in new ways.
Yeah.
So, frequently, I've talked to many wealthy parents, and a lot of them have like the same concern. It says like, how do how do I build within my child like the same drive and same ambition that I had when
Mhm.
they already have everything? I mean, the reason I had all this drive and ambition is because like I wanted these things, and like now they just have it. So like, how do I ensure that that's the case? And that's what I feel. Um, we're already extremely, say, spiritually wealthy, are wealthy in consciousness
Mhm.
until we come here, and then we have these like constraints, and we have to like learn how to have success without having like all of our abilities. But that's also where the fun is at too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely into all the woo-woo stuff. Yeah, and it's like putting a car into a water bottle. That's how restrained it just feels weird at times for me. I'm sure for other people who are awake just to be in a body. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's so awful.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And it's like, you hear things such as like, like grounding. And I would say in my own experience is like I feel super grounded most of the time. Like
Mhm.
super, super grounded. In fact,
Mhm.
sometimes I think maybe I might be the most grounded person on the planet. I don't know. Well, we could debate it and stuff. So I have a lot of fun with the body, enjoying my own and like working out and just feeling different like sensations. But yes, I've heard this in terms of like feeling discomfort or this weirdness, and I think that's like an invitation, perhaps to just, well, what are other ways to ground are to connect. I find nature super supportive of that.
Yeah.
The more you can be in nature, lay down on grass. It's funny, the whole hug a tree type thing, but yeah, leaning against a tree, definitely getting the ocean, salt water. Um, I find those things very supportive of just feeling much more comfortable in your
Yeah.
body because there's so many things that it's unnatural existence. We do it,
Hmm.
but under closer analysis, we probably say, if I could do it differently, I wouldn't. Like, living, 5, 10, 20 floors up in the building, having being immersed in Wi-Fi and other type of like electrical like communication and stuff. Having all of these people around you and their different energies too, being able to hear traffic and like jets overhead and like, sirens. It's that can all add to of just not necessarily feeling like safe in the body or like wanting to be here. And that's why I think nature is so good and like grounding. And
Hmm.
like other ways I think to feel grounding is again, I mentioned this word safety. Well, where did the feelings of not feeling safe in the body begin? Do your own sleuthing
Hmm.
and figure out what that is. Because sometimes it helps to release things that we're carrying in
Yeah.
order to feel more grounded. Um, just briefly, I'll say, a lot of times when we're overwhelmed, there's actually just a natural dissociation that happens.
Hmm.
And so, depending on how we grew up, we can have like a tendency, it's kind of like leave our body in a sense where, it's like a fight, flight, freeze type thing. So, a lot of freezing, or just, I'm not going to notice this, or I'm going to shrink myself, and maybe nothing will happen to me. I'll just be in this stillness.
Hmm.
But if you do that enough times, that can kind of be more the familiar state or like a state that's like easy like to get to.
Yeah.
And so what people their body learns over time is that it doesn't feel good to be in the body. It doesn't feel safe.
Hmm.
And if that's the case, there are a variety of different techniques one can use to
Yeah. Yeah.
to feel safer in the
Yeah.
body.
That's exactly how I feel, to be honest. If we're being honest, I don't feel safe in my body. I'm here, but I'm not here. I'm spending more time, what we call the other side or wherever my soul is. That's where I'm hanging. Here and there, I come down here, but I'm not here at all. It feels
Mhm.
strange. And I heard it can happen with trauma too. And it's tricky because how do you combine both spirituality, culture, trauma? It's just a blended mess that something beautiful can come out of it if we put in the work to it.
Yeah, yeah, very frequently. Um, on that note, speaking directly to you, I'd say whatever you can do to reset and like heal your autonomic nervous system, like the better. And so what's really good for that is things like breath work.
Mm-hmm.
So like, holotropic breath work. And when I say that, I mean something that's probably going to take about more or less an hour to do.
Okay. Yeah.
Those are really good things.
Mm-hmm.
There's different somatic
Mm-hmm.
exercises you can do. There's a person in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
Miami, who's fantastic at this. His name is Dr. Paul Canali, and his process. You actually lay on his table. You're fully clothed, and he will have you do things that, move your body a little bit, get some motion, have
Yeah.
you close your eyes, and he'll just kind of talk about what you're experiencing and challenge you're facing. And then he'll touch you in light different ways
Mm-hmm.
that really get you to get in touch with maybe some deeper underlying things. And what happens is the best way I can say it is like you're being triggered, but in a very safe environment where you're very supported
Mm-hmm.
and you're having an opportunity to re-experience, say, a previous traumatic experience, and you're being allowed to de-stress or let go of that in a place where your body feels safe, you feel safe, and you're being guided through it. And so after a few sessions of that, you can feel much more safer
Yeah.
in your body.
Hmm.
Um, so, and then sometimes I think energy work, like Reiki
Yeah.
can really help with that. But yeah, there are techniques for that. I'd definitely be happy to share more with you.
Yeah, definitely.
And then when you say combine it all, so I think I like in spirituality very much it's just like mind technology, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think like spirituality in many ways, the nuts and bolts of it was figured out a long time ago, like
Hmm.
centuries ago. And I think
Sorry, that's my
um
cat.
nah,
You have it there, buddy.
pretty cat, yeah.
Say hi.
Uh hey there.
Sorry. I
Yeah.
got two and they're just wild.
Yeah. No, cats love getting between you and the camera and the keyboard and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So when the so and I think people got to very high states of consciousness, say through very particular practices, the
Hmm.
yoga, asanas, meditation,
Hmm.
whatever practices you have. But I think it was much more like, say, a smaller group of people. And so it was like more like esoteric, and everyone else was probably just doing like subsistence type stuff, like hunting, gathering, the growing crops, what have you, and stuff. I think now we have an opportunity. It's interesting. I think we have an opportunity for consciousness, higher consciousness to be much more widespread, because I think that's what the internet and podcasts like this allow
Hmm.
and encourage. I think the thing is, it's not mainstream per se.
Yeah.
Much more mainstream than it was, but it's not mainstream in the sense that you're going to find it on, the major networks or the
God.
cable, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
have that be a regular ongoing
Mhm.
effort. So,
Yeah.
um, tying it all together, I think that if you get that mind technology, it really teaches, I think, just a very effective way of navigating life, effective way of approaching things.
Hmm.
Um, and then
Kitsy,
it's
go away.
and
Sorry.
no, it's persistent.
Yeah.
And then as far as the working with the trauma, I think the more you dive into these techniques, the more you're able to release a trauma. Because trauma, just quite simply, it's just stored energy that needs to be processed.
Mm.
That's it.
Yeah, 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 I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I wanted you to touch a little bit on what is feminine and masculine energy, because way before I knew anything about it, when I hear it, I just automatically went to feminine, female, masculine, male, when really it's both. I want to hear your take on it.
hmm Yeah. Another way of saying it is like yin and yang.
Mm,
Um, and it's energies that I'm not sure we can say they're necessarily like opposites, but they sit in different places. And so it's not gender specific. Um, a a man can have like a lot of feminine energy. A woman can have a lot of masculine energy. So all of us are going to have some combination like of the two. And so we're combining those energies as we navigate through things. And sometimes we'll find one energy more comfortable, or we'll find it more successful than
mm,
say another. So
mm,
um, at the job, for instance, the job requires a lot of masculine, or many jobs require like masculine energy because uh, you can describe that in a nutshell, such as like, being task focused, getting things done, being very deliberate, working from like start to finish, um, and, having like a lot of like structure around it. So that can be masculine energy, and feminine energy tends to you associate with like having a lot of flow to it,
mm,
like maybe nurturing, supportive, collaborative,
mhm,
gentle. So the thing is, we need both.
mhm,
At our job, we need like a lot of masculine energy, like to get things done.
mhm,
And I would say quite interestingly, I think when you go into some leadership positions, you actually need to apply like feminine energy. because like, it's more nurturing. You're trying to get other people like to do things. You're trying to develop other people and be supportive of them.
Mhm.
So in the context of an intimate relationship, I find things typically go smoothly when, the masculine energy that the two people have, they're as far apart as possible. And so, I mean, like maybe just using maybe something that is, how do we call it, traditional or maybe expected. The masculine man is leading, he's taking charge, he's planning, um, he's providing some type of support or protection. It's providing safety. And on the feminine side, you'll have say gentler side of things, whereas the nurturing, the support, the collaboration. And when I say it tends to be more successful further apart, because you also have something called polarity between the two. So if you have, let's say, two people together and they're both mostly in their feminine, or they're both mostly in their masculine, that closeness doesn't really create a lot of attraction
Mm.
between the two.
Yeah.
And so the more it's further apart, uh, the greater that polarity, the more the attraction is there. And
Yeah.
I think in relationships, generally when I work with men, a lot of what I'm working on is just really grounding in their masculine. I wouldn't say it's becoming more masculine, it's becoming like their best masculine.
Mhm.
So nothing wrong with like taking charge, but you don't want to be domineering or commanding. There's nothing wrong with leading, but you don't want to not be hearing input from other people. And
Yeah.
with women, it's working a lot at like really helping them become the best feminine they can be. So it's not like, necessarily becoming more feminine. It's just, hey, it's great to be collaborative and supportive. And at the same time, it's good to have your voice.
Mhm.
It's good to like know what you want, and it's okay to say no and have your boundaries.
Mhm.
And it's okay to take a pause and like maybe end an interaction like and come back at another time. And I think what we see a lot of times, what's happening and what's not working in couples is um, the man's not being his best masculine. And surprisingly, I think with on on the female side of things, in a lot of partnerships, you'll see like the woman is like she stepped too much into her masculine.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like you have two masculine energies, both wanting to lead, no one wanting to follow, and like you'll just see more and more conflict created.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Um, for me, I was raised, in a different country. I'm in Canada now. Um, I think this applies also to so many other people or countries of women work, how they can have specific roles and how men can have specific roles. Um, I've had to untangle both culture and choose what suits me and what works for me. Um, because for me, in my culture, is like the man takes care of the house and the woman takes care of the kids and whatnot. I'm learning that here both applies to, it's not a gender thing, like you were saying. I
Yeah,
don't know if that makes sense or not.
it makes sense. And, I think we're seeing like a seismic shift
Hmm.
in dating and say gender roles, gender expectations. Um, I'm not sure what's going to happen on the other side, actually, but it's definitely interesting right now because it's interesting if you go apply for a job. I mean, basically, you'll get hired if you meet the job requirements. And like, on the job, you'll have roles and responsibilities. And if you fulfill those well, you'll be rewarded. And that work relationship will go well and like you'll excel.
Mhm.
And if you don't, that relationship will deteriorate, and at some point, like you'll be asked to leave, or you'll find it so uncomfortable that you'll leave.
Hmm.
I want to say, like in a relationship, it's maybe not like the prettiest to think about, it most encouraging, but you're also in a role too.
Yeah.
And so, each party is going to have, we can't get around it, some
Hmm.
expectations on the other ones. Now, ideally, your list of expectations isn't like the size of a book. If your expectations could, say be brief, concise, maybe fit on one sheet of paper, a half sheet of paper,
Hmm.
that can be more of a path to success, but it's success, but you're still going to have these expectations. And so it's interesting. And it's like, and this is where I think, yeah, curiosity really helps rather than just saying like, this is the best way or this is like the worst way.
Hmm.
Like in the West, yeah. So I grew up in the US,
Hmm.
and so you're in Canada now. I think similar enough.
Yeah.
I see with a lot of humor, um, this whole thing of 50-50. And it's you hear these conversations of men wanting women to pay half. You go out to a restaurant, pay half, or you're living together, you pay like half the bills,
Hmm.
50-50. And for some women, maybe a lot of women, I don't know the right amount, it's become this kind of disdainful thing. There's this one woman I think I've seen, and she has one reel after another where she just walks around with a sign that says, I don't do 50-50. It just kind of parades it around. And I think her reels are like pretty popular. And you'll hear other women saying, I don't want any 50-50 man. Um, so, that's going on.
Hmm.
And so where is that going to come out? And so like, in the West, it seems that, women are having very similar, if not the same, like, education opportunity, very similar, if not the same job opportunity in a lot of cases. A
Hmm.
lot of times, like the money is like the same. So I can see kind of how the 50-50 becomes a natural extension from there. But then we get into, we're never going to outpace our biology, no matter how clever that we think we are. And that's the thing, because, we're part consciousness, but we're part animal too.
Yeah.
And um it's I don't think um a person with predominantly feminine energy is ever going to get around wanting to feel safety or security, or wanting to feel like provided for, like in some way.
Hmm.
And um in the modern world where a lot of things are safe anyway, that frequently will come down to monetary, like security, what can be right. It's not the only way, but when you're looking at, say, things inflexibly, or looking at things in black and white, it can come out to look like that.
Hmm.
Now you go to another culture, um, let's say like the Middle East. I've heard this a lot, that it's much more expected. I think kind of what you're alluding to, like the man's going to do this, the woman's going to do this.
Hmm.
Um, and I know in that culture, like, 50-50 does not fly. The man knows he's going to pay for everything,
Hmm.
and like his money is their money, and her money is her money. So, um, and I even saw like a reel. This was, one woman said, you have to stop complaining about the 50-50, if you're dating a man from a 50-50 culture. That's just the way they were raised. Said if you don't want that, don't date a man from that culture.
Hmm.
And so, you're in an interesting place where you were raised in one, and now like you have like the choice of another. I'm curious for you,
Yeah.
how are you navigating it? Because you definitely have options, but
Mhm.
are you looking for a 50-50, or what is your split of things?
Um, yeah, yeah, I would say equal. I see men and women equal. Even though we're in different shells, we can choose how we do things and what we do. But
Mhm.
yeah, for me, that's how I was raised, is that, my dad take care of everything. My mom stays at home and whatnot. I don't see it that way anymore, but I'm not closed-minded to the point that I can't accept or understand how other people see it. I'm
Yeah.
I'm mo- I'm very open-minded to that. very similar to how you were saying, just to everyone has their own views and perspective,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm open to that. Yeah.
And I think that's what comes down to relationship. Although many relationships may look similar,
Hmm.
like when two people are together, that's a unique pairing.
Yeah.
And so they get to determine what works for them and how they're going to navigate it. So
Hmm.
I think culture is where people start, but I think the real thing that helps people is that increase in consciousness, that increase in awareness,
Hmm.
and determining what what works well for us. Because the more you rely on culture, the more you're relying on a set of rules or dogma that is like handed to you.
Yeah.
And it has sometimes a lot of support there, but it can also have like uh, a lack of flexibility. And
Yeah.
that lack of flexibility can translate to rigid thinking,
Hmm.
and rigid thinking and a harmonious relationship are just not compatible.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, from my perspective, I would say it's more consciousness. It's an expansion because I'm still going through a spiritual awakening and I'm learning different things uh, that I didn't know prior to how I was raised. And I think um, all of us have been each other, and we are each other, and we're connected, regardless of how we look like. And most of us don't even know why we're down here, our mission, but some of us do know.
Hmm.
Is that we're all connected somehow. I don't know if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
it makes sense. I
Yeah.
mean, people, you have to. Life is very interesting.
Hmm.
I sometimes I have this image in my head, like if let's say there's aliens out there and they're just cruising by Earth, they're not even interested in stopping, but on
Yeah.
their way past they just look at how we're doing things here. I
Hmm.
think I think say an advanced civilization that's capable of interplanetary travel, interstellar galaxy travel. Like I think they would look at life here on Earth and they would say, you know. It's really curious how they've organized themselves. I'm
Hmm.
not, I'm not, it's not really clear why it started out that way or where they are now. Because,
Hmm.
I mean, everything is kind of up for scrutiny. I mean, we have countries, but all these borders are like arbitrary. I mean, they were created at some point.
Hmm.
Culture, as you can see in your travels, it's different in different places. It's probably not worthwhile to say one culture is better than the other. I mean, all we can know is that like they're different.
Yeah.
Um, but it seems, I think in passing, the emphasis is in identifying like the differences between people or what separates us
Hmm.
rather than what unites us and what what is similar between us, and also how we can be of best service to each other. Because I
Yeah.
mean we are all here, and so it makes sense. Like the more collaboratively we could work together, the better outcomes that we could get.
Yeah.
But we seem to be so factionalized and fractious and get into these different skirmishes with one another.
Hmm.
I mean, I guess in some ways you could say it's the nature of life. If you look at nature itself, I mean, there's tons of competition going on there. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
they're they're
Yeah.
they're, they're eating each other alive for sure. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you can say, we do it in a much more civilized way, but I also think we could even do it much better. And
Hmm.
so you mentioned like, growing up, and I mentioned generational trauma, and like it doesn't begin with you. And
Hmm.
I feel a lot of what I share with people in the work I'm doing, it's very basic stuff. It's things that I think if people learn by the age of 10,
Hmm.
like it would allow for a much easier, much more harmonious life.
Hmm.
And yet you were not doing that. And so like, I'm largely working with adults who have achieved a lot. But
Hmm.
what's happened is they run into places where they've received what they wanted, but they don't want what they have. And what they don't want is a feeling they have. It could be like just prevailing sadness or depression or anxiety or lack of fulfillment. I mean, we see this just in terms of, the actual health. I'm not sure how things are in Canada, but we went through like an OxyContin crisis,
Oh yeah,
bunch of
here too.
bunch of overdoses there.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of overdoses on fentanyl and stuff, and I'm definitely not casting blame, but
Mhm.
I mean, people go for these things, these substances, largely when they're not finding their own lives like fulfilling. I mean, in the news, we just recently had some actor that died, Matthew Perry.
Oh.
All the resources, available, at least financially.
Mhm.
And, he passed away like in a bathtub, with a ketamine overdose,
Mhm.
after dealing with like, other addictions in life. And it's just, if people gain these tools, these skills I'm talking about, which is self-knowledge, self-appreciation,
Yeah.
so many of these like poor outcomes could be avoided.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people want to be loved. They want to be heard and supported because it's the culture and society we live in. Um, some of us are very quick to judge, to put blame without understanding or listening. That's why it's crazy. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't get paid for it. I don't care to get paid for it, but I'm here to bridge a gap that I see and feel and know, and I have experienced it. So I'm here to honor people's stories, to listen to them, not because my story is better than theirs, because their story is worthy of being heard, whether
Mhm.
people want to listen to it or not. And I think a lot of those overdosed and so much could be prevented through actual
Mhm.
support from friends, families, communities. Most of the time, people just want to talk. But when they talk, what they have to say doesn't always align with us. So we just shut them down and they suppress what was surfacing for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's complexity, and then I think there's also simplicity there. I mean, it's wonderful what you're doing. It gets, I think largely what you're doing is spreading awareness. You're showing people different ways of kind of doing the same thing because we all have to do the same thing. We have to navigate this world.
Yeah.
We have to navigate through our lives, and we want to do it with a certain amount of quote unquote success.
Mhm.
Um, I I really start with the individual though. I feel this is my place. Like
Mhm.
I'm not here to save the world.
Exactly.
I'm here to save the individual.
Mhm.
And I do think through that work, there's a much better chance of the world like in improving
Mhm.
because um I think things don't work at scale the way we would like them to. Like we want to think there's some savior, some institution,
Yeah.
some government out there that will resolve our problems. And I'm definitely here to say absolutely not. It will never happen, and it has never happened.
Mhm.
The way that you're going to get better. I went on a rafting trip, and they told us how you get back in the boat if you were to fall out, and they said you need to practice aggressive self-rescue,
Wow.
and and I laugh because I think that's the way life is.
Yeah.
It's like you have to practice aggressive self-rescue
Mhm.
to get the results that you want in life, and part of that aggressive self-rescue, if ever you're sitting around at some point in life and you're like, and you realize like, I don't like myself, I don't love myself, I say that's your work right there. Until
Yeah.
you can like radically
Mhm.
accept yourself, nothing else is going to work in life.
Mhm.
And like you can achieve things, but it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
There's always going to be feeling like there's this gap, this hole that you have. And so the
Mhm.
what people really want in life,
Mhm.
I'd say the grand reveal, I'd say people is like you don't want what you think you want.
Yeah.
What you really want is a feeling,
Mhm.
and that feeling is fulfillment.
Yeah.
That feeling is peace.
Hmm.
And until you have those, you're going to keep searching for it. But those feelings are never going to come from the outside,
Yeah. Sorry,
you
my
know.
cat's still scratching stuff.
I think with the cat, you got to let it go.
I
Be-
am.
Because 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 my experience with cats is like at some point or another, they will definitely tear it up, and it
Oh
being your
yeah.
furniture, your
Yeah.
door, your carpet, or whatever. And yeah,
Yeah.
cats help with the development of non-attachment to physical things.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. What an incredible episode this has been. I have a few questions for you though as we wrap up. The first one is, how do you continue to unleash your potential every day? And also, how do you guide your clients to do the same?
Yeah, I'd say it's self-care.
Mm,
So I mean, it starts really with the basics. It's like taking care of myself and basic basics, like sleep, nutrition, water, exercise is like super, super important. The other thing, it's really checking in and saying, how do I feel and like what do I want to feel?
mm,
And so it's bringing that awareness. And the other thing is just focusing like where would I like to go?
mhm,
And here's the real key. It's the absence of these things, are trying to have the absence of these things at all times. The
mhm,
absence of blaming, complaining, criticizing, judging, or resenting.
mm,
So I'm not saying I'm successful all the time, but that practice alone
mhm.
helps unleash my potential. And so these are the same things I would have my clients practice. Yeah,
Mhm.
those are the
Yeah,
basics.
yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. So where can people find you if they'd like to work with you?
Let's see. I think probably the best place is one email. So you can send it to Dominic, Dominic, at innerpeaceadvisor.com.
Mhm.
Our Instagram, same handle, Inner Peace Advisor. And you can DM me there. I'll receive your message, or you can send me an email. I'll respond to it there. And yeah, that's the best way. At this point, most of my work is one-on-one. And so a personal message is like the best way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, awesome. Last question for you. Are you ready?
I
Um,
think so.
okay. What is the meaning of life for you?
Uh, Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. The meaning of life. I think succinctly, the best I've done, or the best answer I've come up with so far is just the meaning of life is whatever meaning you give it.
Mm, that's my
Yeah,
answer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we are meaning making machines. We're definitely going to create meaning. And
Mhm.
so each of us will create some meaning for life. And I just respect that. And I'll just say it's the meaning of life is whatever you make it to be.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, Dominic, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all you do. Keep up the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you, Bernadette. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.